Edgar Cayce's forgotten prophecy on America's spiritual purpose. There are moments in history when the veil between worlds grows thin, when a single vision pierces through time itself, revealing truths so profound that even those who receive them hesitate to speak. In the quiet town of Virginia Beach in the summer of 1944, such a moment occurred. Edgar Cayce lay in his familiar trance, his breathing deep and rhythmic. For over 4 decades he had served as a bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. Thousands had witnessed his gift, the way he could diagnose illnesses from hundreds of miles away, describe past lives in startling detail, and speak of ancient civilizations lost to time. But on this particular afternoon, something different stirred in the depths of his consciousness. His voice, usually calm and clinical, carried an unusual urgency. The stenographer's fingers moved quickly across the keys as words poured forth, words that would be carefully filed away, deemed too controversial for a world already trembling on the edge of transformation. What Cayce saw that day wasn't about individual healing or personal karma. It wasn't about Atlantis or ancient Egypt. It was about you, about this moment, about the spiritual destiny of an entire nation, and your sacred role within it. The vision he received was so startling, so revolutionary in its implications, that even his own foundation questioned whether humanity was ready to hear it. For decades, this prophecy remained buried in archives, known only to a handful of researchers who understood its explosive potential. Tonight, you're going to discover why this forgotten vision is suddenly impossible to ignore. You're going to understand how your own spiritual awakening, your moments of inexplicable knowing, your sense that you're here for something greater than ordinary life, all of it fits into a cosmic plan that began long before America's founding and reaches far beyond anything you've imagined. Because what Edgar Cayce saw wasn't just a prophecy about America. It was a roadmap for your soul's deepest purpose. To understand the magnitude of what Cayce revealed about America's spiritual destiny, you first need to grasp the extraordinary nature of the messenger himself. This wasn't a man prone to wild fantasies or ungrounded speculation. For 43 years, Edgar Cayce demonstrated an ability that defied every conventional understanding of human consciousness. While in a self-induced trance state, he could access information that consistently proved accurate, verifiable, and decades ahead of its time. Physicians would send him only a name and address. Without ever meeting the patient, Cayce would describe their condition in precise medical terminology, suggest treatments that baffled doctors but often worked miraculously, and reveal the karmic origins of illness with a compassion that touched thousands of lives. He spoke of vitamins before they were widely known. He described the circulatory system of the human body with accuracy that wouldn't be medically verified for another 20 years. He mentioned the existence of Essene communities near the Dead Sea. 2 decades before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed their presence. But here's what most people don't realize about Edgar Cayce's true gift. His most profound readings weren't about healing bodies, they were about understanding souls. In his deepest trance states, Cayce accessed what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library containing the complete story of every soul's journey through time and space. Within these infinite archives, he could trace your soul's history across lifetimes, understand the spiritual lessons you came here to learn, and glimpse the magnificent purpose that brought you to this exact moment in human history. And it was through these records that he discovered something extraordinary about America itself. This nation, he learned, wasn't founded by historical accident or political convenience. The gathering of souls on this continent, the specific challenges this land would face, the unique spiritual experiments that would unfold here, All of it was orchestrated by forces far grander than human planning. America, according to Cayce's deepest visions, was designed as humanity's greatest spiritual laboratory. June 20th, 1944. The world was still engulfed in the darkness of global war, yet in a small room in Virginia Beach, Edgar Cayce's consciousness expanded beyond the chaos of his time to perceive a truth that would reshape everything we understand about America's purpose. Reading 397629 began like many others, but what emerged was unlike anything in Cayce's vast collection of spiritual insights. He saw America not as a political entity, but as a soul experiment of unprecedented scope, a testing ground where consciousness itself would undergo its most ambitious transformation. This wasn't about creating just another civilization. It was about birthing an entirely new form of human awareness. Imagine for a moment the cosmic intelligence behind such a plan. Every soul currently walking this earth chose to incarnate during the most pivotal period in human history, and many of those souls, perhaps including yours, specifically chose to experience this transformation through American consciousness. The prophecy revealed three distinct phases of this grand experiment. The first phase was the gathering, waves of immigration that brought together souls from every corner of the earth, carrying within them the spiritual wisdom of every culture, every tradition, every hard-won insight about the nature of existence. This wasn't random movement of peoples seeking better economic opportunities. This was orchestrated soul migration. The second phase was the testing, periods of intense conflict and challenge that would forge these diverse souls into a unified spiritual body. Every crisis, every division, every moment when the nation stood at the crossroads between love and fear. These were initiations, spiritual curriculum designed to awaken collective compassion and shared purpose. But it's the third phase that will take your breath away. According to Cayce's vision, we are entering it now. The emergence phase, the moment when America fulfills its deepest spiritual purpose, not through political dominance or economic power, but by demonstrating something the world has never seen before. A civilization where individual spiritual sovereignty and collective unity not only coexist, but strengthen each other. Where your unique spiritual gifts aren't threats to social harmony, but essential ingredients in humanity's next evolutionary leap, where the mystical and practical merge into a new way of being that honors both ancient wisdom and innovative understanding. You weren't born into this time and place by accident. Your soul chose to be here, chose to be part of this unprecedented spiritual experiment, chose to help birth the new world that Cayce saw emerging from the heart of awakened America. Close your eyes for a moment and feel into your ancestry. Feel into the journeys that brought your lineage to this land. What you'll discover might surprise you. Edgar Cayce's vision revealed that every wave of immigration to America followed precise spiritual patterns. These weren't random historical movements driven solely by economic hardship or political persecution. They were orchestrated soul gatherings, each group bringing specific spiritual gifts essential for the grand experiment of consciousness. The indigenous peoples held the original template, a deep understanding of earth wisdom, ceremonial connection to the sacred, and the recognition that all life is interconnected. Their spiritual technology was already perfectly attuned to the land that would become America's laboratory for awakening consciousness. The European settlers carried philosophical frameworks, systems of thought and inquiry that could hold complex spiritual concepts while maintaining intellectual rigor. They brought libraries of wisdom, scholarly traditions, and the revolutionary idea that individual conscience could commune directly with the divine. The forced migration of African souls brought something equally essential: rhythmic connection to spirit, resilience forged through unimaginable suffering, and a musical understanding of how pain can be transformed into transcendent beauty. Their spiritual contribution would become the heartbeat of America's soul music, jazz, blues, gospel, all expressing the alchemical process of turning anguish into art. Asian immigration brought meditation traditions, martial arts that married spiritual discipline with physical mastery, and philosophical systems that understood the illusion of separation between self and cosmos. Later waves continued the pattern, each cultural group carrying specific spiritual technologies that the emerging American consciousness would need. But here's what Cayce saw that most spiritual teachings miss. Even the trauma was purposeful. The displacement, the suffering, the cultural losses that accompanied these migrations. None of it was meaningless pain. It was the psychic pressure necessary for new forms of compassion to emerge. When souls are stripped of their familiar external supports, they're forced to discover the eternal resources that exist within. Your ancestors experienced what they needed to experience, so that you could carry forward both their hard-won wisdom and their unhealed wounds, so that your generation could complete the spiritual work their circumstances didn't allow. Think about your own family's immigration story, the courage it took to leave everything familiar, the challenges they faced, the dreams they held for future generations they would never meet. That wasn't just personal history. That was your soul's curriculum being written across generations. You inherited their strengths, their capacity for resilience, their willingness to trust in unseen possibilities, their faith that suffering could be transformed into service. But you also inherited their unfinished spiritual business, the places where trauma interrupted their growth, where survival took precedence over awakening, where they had to postpone their own spiritual blossoming so that yours could be possible. Every meditation you sit, every moment you choose love over fear, every time you trust your intuitive guidance, you're not just healing yourself. You're completing the spiritual work that brought your lineage to this continent. The gathering phase was preparation. All the ingredients were being assembled for what was to come. Your great-grandparents lived through something they probably couldn't fully understand at the time. The same with your grandparents and your parents. Each generation faced what seemed like insurmountable darkness and somehow found the light to carry forward. Edgar Cayce's prophecy revealed these weren't random historical tragedies. They were spiritual initiations for the American soul. The Civil War wasn't just about slavery or states' rights. At the deepest level, it was about whether the American experiment could hold unity and diversity in the same container. Whether souls who looked different, worshipped differently, came from different cultures could recognize their fundamental spiritual equality. 600,000 souls gave their lives to answer that question. The trauma of that conflict didn't end with Appomattox. It created a psychic wound that would take generations to heal, and a spiritual strength that would be essential for what was to come. Every family that learned to forgive instead of perpetuate hatred, every community that chose healing over revenge, every individual who discovered they could love beyond the boundaries of similarity. They were building the spiritual infrastructure America would need for its ultimate purpose. The two world wars continued this pattern on a global scale. Young American souls traveled to foreign lands, not primarily to fight, but to learn that suffering is universal, that courage exists in every culture, that the capacity for both evil and grace lives within every human heart. They returned changed, carrying within them a deeper understanding of humanity's interconnectedness. Those who didn't return had chosen, at the soul level, to offer their lives as a kind of spiritual payment, energy that would support the collective awakening still to come. The Great Depression taught an entire generation that external security is ultimately an illusion. that the only reliable abundance comes from inner resources and community bonds. Families that learned to share their last meal with neighbors, individuals who discovered joy even in the midst of material lack. They were developing the spiritual muscles America would need to birth a civilization based on love rather than fear. Your own family's struggles during these periods weren't meaningless suffering. They were your lineage learning to hold light during darkness, building the spiritual muscle memory you would need for your own role in what Cayce saw coming. Every story your grandparents told about surviving hardship, every example of your ancestors choosing hope over despair, generosity over hoarding, faith over cynicism. These weren't just family memories. They were spiritual transmissions, encoding within your consciousness the possibility that love is always stronger than fear. Think about the strongest person in your family lineage, the one who seemed to possess an unshakable faith despite facing tremendous challenges. That strength didn't come from nowhere. It was forged through exactly the experiences they needed to develop the spiritual capacity that would eventually flow through your DNA, your cellular memory, your inherited wisdom. Because Cayce's vision showed that every generation was preparing for the ultimate test, the moment when America would face its deepest spiritual choice, not through external conflict, but through the spiritual orientation of its people. That moment, according to the prophecy, is now. Something has been happening to you over the past few years, maybe longer. Moments when you just knew something without being able to explain how. Synchronicities that felt too meaningful to dismiss as coincidence. An inner voice that spoke beyond your logical mind, guiding you toward decisions that made no practical sense but somehow felt absolutely right. You might have questioned your sanity, wondered if you were imagining things, looked around at other people living seemingly normal lives, and felt like you were operating on a completely different frequency. What you've been experiencing isn't imagination. It's the beginning of your awakening to something Edgar Cayce prophesied would happen during America's spiritual emergence, the recognition of guides. According to Cayce's vision, America's transformation would begin when enough individuals started accessing their inner guidance systems, not through organized religion alone, but through direct spiritual experience. He saw a time when meditation, intuitive development, and mystical awareness would move from the margins to the mainstream. This wasn't about replacing existing faith traditions. It was about every person discovering their own direct connection to the divine wisdom that flows through all traditions. You've felt this, haven't you? That sense that you're being guided by something larger than your personality, that there are forces working on your behalf, that your rational mind can't quite grasp, that your life is unfolding according to a plan more beautiful and complex than anything you could have designed yourself. This isn't wishful thinking, it's spiritual technology. Every soul incarnates with access to guidance. But during most of human history, the density of third-dimensional consciousness made it difficult to maintain clear connection. What's happening now, according to Cayce's prophecy, is that the frequency of consciousness on Earth is rising rapidly enough that this guidance is becoming accessible to ordinary people living ordinary lives. The guides you're recognizing might be ancestors who've completed their earthly curriculum and chosen to assist your awakening. They might be aspects of your own higher self, the part of your consciousness that exists outside of time and can see the bigger picture of your soul's journey. They might be angelic beings, ascended masters, or forms of divine intelligence that don't fit into any human categories. What matters isn't who they are. What matters is that you're learning to trust them. Every time you follow an intuitive impulse that leads somewhere beautiful, every time you make a decision based on inner knowing rather than external evidence, every time you choose the path that feels aligned, even when it looks impractical. You're participating in the spiritual awakening that Cayce saw transforming America. But this individual awakening was only half of what he prophesied. The other half would require something unprecedented in human history, the integration of all spiritual wisdom traditions into a new understanding of consciousness itself, while maintaining the unique beauty of each path. America, according to the vision, would become the first civilization to demonstrate that spiritual diversity strengthens rather than threatens truth. Imagine a library that contains every spiritual insight ever discovered by human consciousness. Every prayer, every meditation, every mystical experience, every moment of divine communion, all of it preserved, accessible, alive. Edgar Cayce prophesied that America would become this library, not as a physical building but as a living field of consciousness. He called it the Hall of Records, a collective awakening where humanity's spiritual wisdom would be integrated and made available to anyone ready to receive it. You're witnessing the early stages of this prophecy right now. Ancient Tibetan teachings available through podcast apps, Sufi poetry shared on social media, indigenous wisdom keepers speaking to global audiences through online platforms, Christian mystics, Hindu sages, Buddhist masters, Jewish Kabbalists, all offering their paths while recognizing the universal truth flowing through every tradition. This isn't spiritual dilution, it's spiritual integration. For the first time in human history, a soul can study with teachers from every tradition without leaving their living room. You can practice Zen meditation in the morning, study Rumi's poetry at lunch, and attend a virtual ceremony with a Native American elder in the evening, all while maintaining your connection to whatever faith tradition feels most like home. The boundaries between traditions are dissolving, not because the traditions are losing their essence, but because consciousness is expanding enough to recognize the single truth expressing itself through infinite forms. Science and spirituality are merging too, just as Cayce predicted. Quantum physics is rediscovering what mystics always knew, that consciousness and matter are intimately connected, that observation affects reality, that the universe is far more mysterious and interconnected than materialist thinking suggested. Neuroscience is mapping the brain states achieved through prayer and meditation, validating ancient practices through modern measurement tools. Medical researchers are studying the healing power of forgiveness, gratitude, and compassion. Psychologists are exploring past life regression, near-death experiences, and other phenomena that were considered fringe just decades ago. The Hall of Records isn't being built, it's being recognized. The wisdom was always here. The technology needed to share it globally is finally available. And souls like you are awakening to your ability to access it directly. But Cayce's prophecy went even deeper. He saw that this integration would trigger a profound shift in the types of souls choosing to incarnate in America. Souls who had completed their individual learning curriculum and were returning specifically for service. Souls who would retain more conscious memory of their purpose and carry an inner knowing that they were here for humanity's awakening. If you've always felt like you don't quite fit into conventional society, if you've struggled to find meaning in purely material pursuits, if you've felt inexplicably drawn to spiritual service even when you couldn't define what that meant, you may be one of these souls. There are souls walking among us who remember, not past lives exactly, something deeper. They remember the time before time, when consciousness existed in unity, before fragmenting into individual experiences. They remember the plan, the cosmic curriculum that guided their choice to incarnate during this particular period of human evolution. Edgar Cayce prophesied that these souls would begin incarnating in America in increasing numbers as the spiritual awakening reached critical mass. They would be recognizable not by any external markers, but by the quality of their inner orientation. They would feel inexplicably drawn to spiritual service, even when they couldn't define what form that service might take. They would struggle to find fulfillment in conventional success, sensing that they were here for something far more significant than personal achievement. They would retain more conscious connection to their guidance systems, experiencing synchronicities and mystical awareness as natural aspects of daily life. They would feel a deep knowing that they were here to midwife humanity's next evolutionary leap, even when their logical minds couldn't explain what that meant. If this description resonates in your bones, if reading these words triggers a recognition that goes beyond intellectual understanding, you may be carrying what Cayce called pattern memory. This isn't about being special or chosen in any ego-inflating sense. It's about recognizing your function within the larger organism of awakening consciousness. Think of it like this. If humanity were a single body preparing for its next stage of development, some souls would incarnate as the heart, pumping love and life force through the entire system. Others would serve as the nervous system, transmitting information and coordinating responses. Still others would function as the immune system, protecting the whole organism from influences that could derail its evolution. Your particular role might be as simple as raising conscious children, transmitting awakened awareness to the next generation through the quality of your presence and parenting. Your function might be through your work, bringing integrity, compassion, and spiritual wisdom into whatever field you've chosen to serve. Your contribution might be purely energetic, holding such a stable frequency of love and peace that everyone around you is unconsciously elevated simply by being in your presence. The prophecy didn't describe heroic spiritual warriors or enlightened masters leading the transformation. It described ordinary people living extraordinary inner lives, souls who had chosen to return during this period specifically to serve love in whatever way felt most natural and authentic. But Cayce's vision included a warning. This influx of service-oriented souls would create new challenges both for the individuals carrying this purpose and for the collective awakening itself. Because with greater spiritual capacity comes greater spiritual responsibility, and not everyone would be ready to embrace what that means. We are living through the most important decision point in human history. Edgar Cayce saw it clearly, a moment when every soul on earth would face a fundamental choice that would determine not just their individual future, but the entire trajectory of human consciousness. He called it the Great Choosing, the choice between love-based consciousness and fear-based control, between unity and separation, between service and selfishness, between trust in the unseen intelligence that guides evolution and the illusion that human ego can manage the complexity of planetary transformation. According to the prophecy, America would be the primary battleground for this choice, not through external conflict, but through the spiritual orientation of its people. You feel this choice presenting itself every day, don't you? In the morning, when you decide whether to start your day with gratitude or complaint, when you encounter someone whose beliefs trigger your judgment, and you choose whether to see their fear or their divine essence, when you face challenges and decide whether to trust that they're serving your growth or to victim yourself to circumstances. Every choice you make is literally a vote for humanity's future. When you choose compassion over criticism, you're strengthening the field of love-based consciousness that supports every soul's awakening. When you choose to trust your inner guidance over external authorities that operate from fear, you're helping to build the new paradigm where individual spiritual sovereignty is honored. when you choose to see the sacred in everyday experiences rather than waiting for enlightenment to happen someday in some other circumstance. You're participating in the recognition that heaven isn't a destination, but a quality of consciousness available right now. But the prophecy also acknowledged that this choosing wouldn't be easy. There are forces, both human and non-human, that benefit from humanity remaining unconscious, divided, and controllable. They will intensify their efforts to create fear, confusion, and separation as more souls awaken to their true nature and purpose. You've witnessed this, haven't you? The increasing polarization in politics, media, and social interactions. The way information is manipulated to create anxiety rather than understanding. The subtle and not so subtle pressure to choose sides in conflicts that are designed to prevent recognition of our fundamental unity. This isn't happening to you. It's happening through you and around you as the battlefield for consciousness itself. Your daily choice to remain centered in love. Your decision to respond rather than react to triggering events. Your commitment to seeing the divine in people who seem to have forgotten their own divinity. These aren't just personal practices, they're spiritual activism. They're your way of voting for the world you want to live in. The great choosing won't be decided by politicians or institutions. It will be determined by the collective spiritual choices of individuals like you. People who understand that their inner state of consciousness directly affects the field of possibility available to everyone. Which brings us to the most practical aspect of Cayce's prophecy. How do you prepare yourself to serve consciously during this unprecedented time of choosing? Edgar Cayce was remarkably specific about how souls could prepare themselves for conscious participation in America's spiritual awakening. Daily meditation wasn't just personal development. It was preparation for spiritual service. When you sit in silence regularly, you're not only healing your own consciousness, you're contributing to the collective field of peace that supports every other soul's awakening process. Studying your dreams wasn't just interesting psychological exploration. It was training in the language your soul uses to communicate guidance. Every dream you remember and contemplate is strengthening your ability to receive the information you'll need to fulfill your purpose during these transformative times. Developing your intuition wasn't just about making better personal decisions. It was about learning to recognize the inner voice that will guide you toward your highest service as the old world structures continue to evolve. Practicing unconditional love wasn't just about becoming a nicer person. It was about embodying the frequency that would eventually become the foundation of the new civilization emerging from humanity's spiritual maturation. But here's what Cayce emphasized most strongly. You don't need to be perfect to participate in this prophecy. You need to be willing. Willing to trust that your spiritual experiences are real, even when they don't fit into conventional understanding. Willing to follow your inner guidance, even when it leads you away from external approval or material security. Willing to love others even when they can't yet recognize their own divine nature. Willing to hold steady in your spiritual center, even when everything around you seems chaotic and uncertain. The prophecy described how ordinary people living conscious lives would become transmitters of light, raising the spiritual frequency of everyone around them simply through the quality of their presence. Your morning meditation creates ripples of peace that touch people you'll never meet. Your choice to forgive instead of holding grudges literally changes the emotional atmosphere of every space you enter. Your decision to see the divine in difficult people creates an energetic field that makes it safer for them to explore their own spiritual nature. You don't have to teach anyone anything. You don't have to convince anyone of spiritual truths. You don't have to fix anyone or save anyone or enlighten anyone. You simply have to be authentic about your own spiritual journey, living from the love and peace and joy that emerge naturally when you're aligned with your soul's purpose. But what about the people closest to you who don't understand this spiritual perspective? What about family members and friends who think you've gotten weird? What about feeling lonely on a path that sometimes seems to separate you from the people you love most? Cayce's prophecy had profound wisdom for this challenge too. One of the loneliest aspects of spiritual awakening is watching people you love remain trapped in perspectives that create suffering for themselves and others. Your heart breaks watching a family member repeat the same self-destructive patterns. Your soul aches listening to friends complain about problems they could solve if they were willing to take spiritual responsibility for their lives. You feel frustrated trying to share insights that could genuinely help, only to be met with resistance, ridicule, or polite dismissal. Edgar Cayce's prophecy acknowledged that awakening souls would often feel misunderstood by the very people whose love and support they most desired. But this too was part of the plan. Your role isn't to wake anyone up. Your role is to love so unconditionally that you create a field of safety where others can explore their own spiritual questions if and when they choose to. Think about the person in your life who embodies this quality, someone whose presence makes you feel accepted exactly as you are, someone who never judges your struggles or tries to fix your problems but simply holds space for your authentic experience, someone whose love feels so stable that it gives you permission to be vulnerable, curious, imperfect. That person is demonstrating the kind of love that actually supports transformation. When you try to convince others of spiritual truths, you're inadvertently communicating that they're wrong as they are. Even if your intentions are loving, the energy feels corrective, which naturally triggers defense mechanisms. But when you love others exactly as they are while maintaining your own spiritual center, when you respond to their fear with compassion rather than judgment, when you demonstrate through your presence that peace and joy are possible even in difficult circumstances, you're creating conditions where their own curiosity about your inner source can arise naturally. Your family member who dismisses your meditation practice might find themselves drawn to mindfulness apps during stressful periods. Your friend who ridicules spiritual concepts might start asking questions about your unshakable optimism when their world falls apart. Your coworker who seems purely materialistic might begin sharing their own intuitive experiences once they sense you won't judge or analyze them. The prophecy promised that your steadfast love would eventually create the safety others need to explore their own spiritual questions, not because you taught them anything, but because you embodied something they recognized as authentic. This requires tremendous patience and trust in timing that extends far beyond your personal preferences. But Cayce's vision included a remarkable resource for maintaining this patience, a form of guidance that comes not from external teachers or ancient texts, but from the wisest version of yourself. Close your eyes and imagine yourself 10 years from now, living fully aligned with your soul's purpose, radiating the peace and wisdom that come from complete spiritual maturity. This future version of yourself looks back at your current challenges with infinite compassion. They remember exactly how it felt to struggle with the difficulties you're facing now. They understand the spiritual curriculum hidden within your circumstances, and they're available to offer guidance whenever you need it. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. According to Edgar Cayce's prophecy, souls participating in America's spiritual awakening would receive guidance from their own future evolved selves as preparation for eventually becoming ancestors who guide future generations. Time isn't linear the way we experience it in physical reality. Your consciousness exists simultaneously at every point in your soul's journey, the version of you that has already learned the lessons you're currently learning, that has already healed the wounds you're currently healing, that has already embodied the love you're currently growing into. That version exists now and can communicate with your present awareness. In meditation, in quiet moments, in the space between sleeping and waking, you can actually commune with this wiser aspect of yourself. Ask your future self how to handle a relationship challenge. Listen for the response that comes not from your current personality's agenda, but from the expanded perspective of your soul's ultimate growth. Ask your future self about a career decision you're facing. Notice the guidance that emerges from love rather than fear, from service rather than ego, from trust in your path rather than anxiety about outcomes. Ask your future self why you chose the exact circumstances you're experiencing. Feel into the love that orchestrated even your most difficult experiences as opportunities for awakening capacities you didn't know you possessed. This isn't about bypassing the legitimate emotions and practical challenges of your current situation. It's about accessing the deeper wisdom that can help you navigate difficulties from a place of spiritual understanding rather than reactive confusion. Your future self remembers choosing every aspect of your current life, including the challenges you sometimes wish you could escape. They chose your family of origin because it would activate specific spiritual growth opportunities. They chose your personality traits, your talents, your struggles, your attractions, your resistances, all as curriculum for developing the consciousness you need to serve your highest purpose. From this expanded perspective, nothing in your life is a mistake. Everything is medicine. Even the experiences that feel like obstacles are actually vehicles for developing the spiritual qualities that your soul came here to embody. But the ultimate purpose of connecting with your future self-wisdom isn't just to navigate your current challenges more skillfully. According to Cayce's prophecy, it's preparation for a role that extends far beyond your current lifetime. You are being prepared to become an ancestor who guides future generations, creating an unbroken chain of spiritual mentorship across time itself. This reveals the true scope of America's spiritual purpose, not just to awaken the souls currently incarnated, but to establish a template for conscious evolution that will serve humanity for generations to come. The Forgotten Prophecy's climax revealed something breathtaking about America's ultimate spiritual destiny. This nation would become the first civilization in human history to successfully demonstrate that individual spiritual freedom and collective unity are not only compatible, but necessary for humanity's next evolutionary stage. Every previous attempt at conscious community had faced the same dilemma. Either individual expression was sacrificed for group harmony, creating spiritual oppression disguised as unity, or collective wisdom was abandoned for personal freedom, creating spiritual chaos disguised as liberation. America would solve this ancient puzzle by showing the world how diversity strengthens rather than threatens spiritual truth. You are living proof of this possibility. You practice meditation techniques from Tibet, study poetry from 13th century Persia, incorporate Native American ceremony into your spiritual life, and find deep meaning in the mystical teachings of Christianity, all while using modern technology to connect with like-minded souls around the planet. You don't see this as spiritual confusion. You recognize it as spiritual integration. Your unique combination of influences hasn't diluted your spiritual understanding. It's deepened it. You've discovered that truth is so vast, so multifaceted, that it takes thousands of cultural expressions to even begin to capture its essence. This integration is happening at levels that previous generations couldn't have imagined. Ancient wisdom keepers are using social media to share teachings that were once available only to initiated students after decades of preparation. Scientists are rediscovering spiritual principles through quantum physics research. Entrepreneurs are building businesses based on conscious values rather than pure profit motives. The boundaries between sacred and secular are dissolving because consciousness is recognizing itself everywhere. You find the divine in your morning coffee ritual, your work meetings, your conversations with strangers in the grocery store. You understand that every interaction is an opportunity for spiritual service. Every challenge is curriculum for awakening. Every moment is an invitation to embody love more completely. This isn't spiritual bypassing or New Age superficiality. It's the recognition that awakening consciousness doesn't require withdrawal from ordinary life. It transforms ordinary life into expressions of the sacred. America's gift to human consciousness is demonstrating that you don't have to choose between spiritual depth and practical engagement with the world. You can meditate deeply and run a conscious business. You can study ancient wisdom and innovate modern solutions to current problems. You can honor traditional teachings and create new forms of spiritual expression that serve contemporary needs. The prophecy described this integration reaching a tipping point where America's example would inspire similar awakenings worldwide. Not through force or conversion, but through demonstration that another way of living is possible. A way of life where every person's unique spiritual gifts are honored while serving the whole, where diversity is celebrated as the creativity of consciousness, exploring itself through infinite forms, where practical solutions emerge from spiritual wisdom rather than ego-driven competition. You are not watching this prophecy unfold from the sidelines. You are actively creating it through every choice to trust love over fear, unity over separation, service over selfishness. But the prophecy ends with both a promise and a choice that brings everything back to your personal spiritual journey. Edgar Cayce's forgotten prophecy concludes with words that seem written specifically for your soul. You are here by choice, not chance. Every experience that shaped you, every challenge that strengthened you, every moment of beauty that opened your heart, every instance of guidance that led you forward, all of it was orchestrated by the infinite intelligence of your own soul, choosing exactly the curriculum needed to prepare you for this moment when you recognize your role in humanity's greatest spiritual awakening. The prophecy doesn't require you to be a teacher or healer or leader in any conventional sense. It doesn't demand that you start a spiritual organization or write books or speak to large audiences. It requires only that you be authentically yourself while serving love above all else. Your sacred assignment might be raising conscious children, transmitting awakened awareness to the next generation through the quality of your presence and the depth of your understanding. Your mission might be bringing spiritual principles into your workplace, demonstrating that business can be conducted with integrity, that success can be measured by contribution rather than accumulation, that prosperity flows naturally when work is aligned with service. Your purpose might be creating art that reminds others of their divine nature, music that opens hearts, stories that heal wounds, images that reveal the sacred in the ordinary. Your contribution might be the simple but profound act of loving your neighbors, seeing past their personalities to their souls, offering forgiveness instead of judgment, choosing compassion over criticism in every interaction. The prophecy makes clear that America's spiritual awakening won't happen through grand gestures or dramatic events. It will emerge through millions of ordinary people making extraordinary choices in their daily lives. Your choice to meditate instead of scrolling through social media, your decision to respond to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness, your commitment to seeing beauty even in difficult circumstances, your willingness to trust your inner guidance, even when it doesn't make logical sense. These aren't small, insignificant actions. They're the building blocks of the new world Edgar Cayce saw emerging from awakened American consciousness.